What's going on, everyone? I'm just a typical, average American here today to react and learn about the Canadian provinces and territories explained. Now, I actually feel like I have somewhat of a understanding of Canadian provinces just because I kind of look at them as equivalent to states in the United States. I've never heard of a Canadian territory. I don't even know if I could guess what that is. I would think maybe that a territory encompasses many Canadian provinces, or a territory sounds bigger to me. I don't know. I'm just completely I'm totally speculating here. But since I have looked at a couple of the Canadian provinces up until now, I thought, hey, I could use like a nice explanation of what exactly they are, maybe how laws work with them, and then suddenly I'm made aware of territories, which I've never even heard of, and I'm like, well, I need to know about territories too. So here we are. Let's find out.
Hello and welcome back. Today we've set ourselves the challenge of explaining Canada's provinces and territories in just 5 minutes.
Okay.
There are 10 Canadian provinces and 3 territories, and added together, they make Canada the second largest country in the world.
Wow, wait. I want to look at this. Oh, you know, I couldn't even, because the names are abbreviated, I don't even know if I could remember all the provinces. There's Ontario, Quebec, British Columbia. Nothing else is ringing a bell, sorry. And territories? Which of these are territories? Well, that would mean that the territories are kind of like provinces. They're just geographic locations within Canada. That's not what I thought they'd be. Okay. I still not sure I quite understand.
3 territories, and added together, they make Canada the second largest country in the world, behind Russia. Traditionally, territories had delegated power from the Canadian federal government and were largely run by federal officials. Provinces, meanwhile, were granted significant powers of self-governance thanks to the Constitution Act of 1867.
Wow. Well, that was almost 200 years ago. So, geographically speaking, like size, population, provinces and territories are not all that different. Well, they're extremely different based on one thing, based on the fact that territories are mostly run and overseen by the federal government in Canada, whereas provinces are a lot more like individual states. So that analogy kind of works in the United States, where each one has its own local government and ruling bodies, and everybody together kind of encompasses all of Canada. I think I can understand this. I think it's making its way through the old brain.
Over the last half century, there has been a shift of power from the federal government to the 3 territories, a process known as devolution.
Oh,
And they have now increased powers of self-government.
well, that would mean they're becoming just like provinces now, right? There's 3 of them? 3 territories? Okay.
Provinces, meanwhile, have a long established power split with the federal government, and if there is to be any change to this split, then a constitutional amendment is required.
Okay. Well, at first I was saying provinces have a lot of independent ruling power, and now it's like, okay, it's like a relationship with the federal government, a partnership where they decide some things, the government decides some things for all of Canada. That's really similar to the United States, honestly.
As you can imagine, this can all get quite complex, but the basics here are that the provinces have greater local power and self-governance than the territories, which are
Okay.
mainly administered, albeit less and less as time goes by the federal government.
Okay, perfect. That's makes complete sense.
Ontario is the most populated province, with around 15 million out of Canada's 38.5 million people.
15 million, almost half of all Canadians live in Ontario. But I did learn a bit about this and just how south Canada goes into the United States. It's really poking its way down into the United States. I don't mind it though. I kind of like it.
People living there. Ontario is also home to Canada's largest city, Toronto, and the province is in the east of Canada. Ontario protrudes down further into the US than any other province, and the
Exactly. Look at this thing. Look at Ontario just jutting, just bulging down into the United States like a glove, like a hand in a glove.
southernmost tip of Ontario is further south than all of Minnesota.
Yeah, that honestly blew my mind when I first learned that. Canada went down further south than some of the states in the United States. No Americans, except maybe the ones living in Michigan and Wisconsin, Minnesota, New York, aside from them, believe me, no Americans know this. I told some of my friends about this fact, and they were like, that's impossible. And I was saying, yeah, it sounds impossible, but it's not. You have to believe.
The province with the smallest population is Prince Edward Island, which has 165,000 residents.
Prince Edward Island. I've never even heard of this. Is this a province or a territory?
The smallest population is
Ontario is further south than all of Minnesota.
The province with the smallest population is Prince Edward Island,
I've never heard of this.
which has 165,000 residents. That's still more than the 3 territories, Nunavut, Yukon, and the
Hold on, sorry. I've heard of Nova Scotia for some reason. Why have I heard of Nova Scotia, but not Prince Edward Island?
165,000 residents. That's still more than the 3 territories, Nunavut, Yukon, and the Northwest Territories, combined though.
Oh.
They have a total population of just 128,000 inhabitants.
Wow, so all of the territories in Canada are to the northwest, and there's 3 of them, and they have hardly any of the Canadian population living there. That's really interesting. I don't know if there's anything like that in the United States. Very unique.
Despite containing 40% of Canada's landmass.
All of Canada's
Yeah.
land north of 60 degrees latitude is in the 3 territories, as are all the islands off the country's north coast, as well as Hudson Bay, the huge saltwater expanse which covers much of northeast Canada.
The 4 least populated provinces are the so-called Atlantic provinces, so named because they're all on Canada's Atlantic coast. Newfoundland and Labrador,
Newfoundland, I've heard of that. Labrador, I've kind of heard of that. This is starting to ring a bell a little bit, like at some point, somewhere along the line, someone said these words to me, and they burned a tiny, tiny little spot in my head. But, that's another crazy thing about Canada. How much land mass it has, but how densely the population is skewed to be down south. I never really appreciated that fact until recently.
New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. None of them have a population of 1 million or more, although Nova Scotia is only a few thousand inhabitants away from hitting that milestone.
Quebec is the second most populated province with 8.5 million people, and it's the only
Okay.
province where French is the dominant language. British
I was gonna say, I've been thinking, it seems like there are a lot of French-speaking Canadians, and that part of Canada is pretty important. So now it kind of clarifies to me, well, they're the second largest province in all of Canada. There's a lot of people there.
5 million people, and it's the only province where French is the dominant language. British Columbia on the west coast has a population of 5.5 million, while the so-called prairie provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan and Manitoba have populations of 4 million, 1.1 and 1.3 million respectively.
Man, you have no idea. Like, this is a weird experience for me. Seeing the words Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and finally it's all ringing a bell for me. I don't know, this feels like a unique experience where I've heard of all these places, but I needed it like presented very plainly on a map like this in front of me and being forced to acknowledge it, to be like, that is where they are. That's how it all looks. Yeah, I'm having a moment.
The climate differs greatly across Canada, with the 3 territories having perhaps the toughest weather of all.
Right.
Winters up north can be savage, with temperatures reaching a scarcely imaginable -40 Celsius, plus a brutal wind chill.
Minus 40 Celsius. Hold on. minus 40 Celsius. Minus 40 Fahrenheit. What on earth?
Some areas in the north are snow-covered virtually all year, and even in the more temperate parts, summer only hangs around for a fleeting few months per year. Even in milder provinces, cold weather and snow are an inevitable part of life in a Canadian winter.
This is, funny enough, this is how Americans think all of Canada is like. I don't know if that's where the misconception comes from, but most of Canada, most Canadians live more south where the climate is far more manageable. And this explains, to me, why so much of northern Canada is so loosely populated. That makes a lot of sense, and that's where all the super harsh cold weather that Americans think of when they think of Canada, that's where it actually is.
With over half the country being prone to snowfalls for more than 6 months per year.
The good news...
Hold on.
Provinces, cold weather and snow are a fleeting few months per year. Even in milder provinces, cold weather and snow are an inevitable part of life in a Canadian winter, with over half the country being prone to snowfalls for more than 6 months per year.
Hey, you know what? Given that fact, I don't think it's totally unreasonable that we think Canada has a lot of snow. Much, much, much more than the United States. Maybe that's the thing. That's the pivotal thing here. But we and Americans tend to exaggerate how much snow is in Canada. But there definitely is quite a bit, from what I'm hearing.
The good news is that summers are great in Canada with long, hot spells of sunny weather.
Ooh.
British Columbia has the most temperate climate overall of all the provinces, but it also gets its fair share of rain. Basically, if you like real seasons, snowy winters, hot summers, and beautiful so-called shoulder seasons...
Real seasons, like the winters are winter, and the summers are summer. By God, it's cold or it's hot. We don't mess around in Canada.
You'll love Canada. If you like constant warm weather and a permanently blue sky above you, this might not be the country for you.
Culturally, the three territories are rural, traditional, and have a deep-rooted link between people and their land.
Yeah.
The 4 Atlantic provinces have a strong Celtic feel to them, with strong ties to Gaelic history and culture. New Brunswick, one of the 4, is the only province which is officially bilingual, French and English.
Quebec.
Wow. I didn't realize that the different territories and provinces had such a distinguishment between them, culturally even.
The only province with French as the dominant language has a culture, music and TV scene and a feel all of its own, and has arguably got the strongest distinct identity of any province. Ontario, or more specifically Southern Ontario, is probably the most urban and metropolitan province and certainly one of the most diverse.
Saskatchewan and Manitoba are characterised by big sky, small towns, strong communities and friendly people, while Alberta is the province...
Sounds really, really Canadian.
Big sky, small towns, strong communities and friendly people, while Alberta is the province which leans furthest to the right politically. Alberta has an independent spirit and can be somewhat defiant towards the federal government, a stance enabled somewhat by its vast oil reserves and economic strength.
Okay.
The final province before you hit the Pacific...
Wow, each province really has its own personality, which is a lot like what Americans would say about our states. So that's pretty cool.
Pacific Ocean is British Columbia, an outdoor sports paradise which contains both a liberal-feeling city in Vancouver and some more conservative communities in its interior.
Which one do you like the sound of the best? If you visited Canada, which province was your favourite? Tell us in the comments and, naturally, hit subscribe before you...
Wow, that is the end. That was by Canada, top to bottom. I liked that. I give you a like. No, but seriously, that was a really good video. And I'm glad that they made sure to give a lot of extra information about the identities and the history of each of the provinces and territories, rather than just saying, oh, this is a list of that. This is just a list of them. This is where they are. They did do that, but I feel like there's a lot more background information that I really needed to know. Especially with, there are a lot of interesting things here as far as the population density between the different geographic regions, the difference in climate, what affects the population. and the fact that there's a big difference in Canadian culture depending on where you live. But when you think about it, that makes perfect sense. When people live in different places, and in Canada, it even feels more so like the places are quite distinctly separated based on how many people live there and or how few people live there, and the climate and what language they speak and all sorts of things. One of the provinces was St. James? What was it called? Anyway, was an island, for crying out loud. Don't blame me. I still haven't memorized the names of all the provinces, but I'm trying my best here. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this reaction, feel free to give it a like or leave a comment. And if you're interested in more videos like this, me reacting to Canada, Canadian culture, places, things I've never seen before, feel free to subscribe for more. And until then, thanks for watching, and see you next time.